sorry. I was gonna have you guys introduce yourselves, but I'll introduce you guys. So we've got Hattie Metcalfe and Meg Howe, who are running for student media officer. And we've got Johnathan Lee debating, and George Boatfield, who's the current student media officer, who he's co-chairing. John, please take it away. Thanks.
All right. Good evening from the Herschel Lecture Theatre 2 in Newcastle University. My name is Johnathan Lee, first year chemical engineering student, and I welcome you to the Newcastle University Student Union debate for the role of student media officer. This evening's debate will be between Hattie Metcalfe, Stage 3 English Literature student and the careers co-head of culture, and Meg Howe, Stage 3 History student and the careers head of life and style. I am joined here by George Boatfield, the current student media officer. This debate will cover the different aspects of each candidate's manifesto, and everyone will have 1 minute to respond to each question posed. As this is a debate, candidates, you are allowed to rebut or question the other candidate's answers, and can indicate so by raising your hands. Here, I would also like to read out the statement of respect. NUSU welcomes all Newcastle University students to the 2022 election debates organized and broadcast by NUSU Student Media. Our priority is to facilitate a fair and democratic election, and we believe in freedom of speech and the right for all students to express their views. However, we will not tolerate harassment or discrimination of any kind. Our priority is, we ask that at all times you treat fellow students, colleagues, and staff with respect. Anyone displaying rude, aggressive, or other inappropriate behavior within the online chat room or in the room will be immediately removed and will be unable to play an active role in this or future debates relating to the 2022 student elections. For everyone watching, you can submit your questions for our candidates using the hashtag NUSU debates on Twitter or through the live chat on YouTube. Please indicate who your question is directed to and whether you wish to remain anonymous. We will also be allowing our audiences on site to pose questions directly to them. Without much further ado, if both candidates are ready, we may start, and I shall begin by asking the candidates to introduce themselves and present their opening arguments, which will be 1 minute and 30 seconds long and uninterrupted. With that, may I please begin with Hattie?
Hi everyone, my name's Hattie and I'm a third year English literature student running in this election to ensure student media is kept current, creative and collaborative over the next year. My three aims for this are to introduce a climate sub-editor to work with eco-societies, work with sports clubs to ensure their fixtures are more widely broadcast using the creativity of every branch of student media, and create regular feedback forms, anonymous submission forms and welfare check-ins to ensure welfare is made a priority over the next year. I'm the current head of culture, former film sub-editor, co-host of the Courier Culture Show, and have written over 100 every article, 100 articles for the Courier during my time at university. Alongside this, I've been performing duties as student blogger for the School of English. I really hope this debate just gives a bit more clarity to all of my policies, and I'm looking forward to answering any of your questions.
All right, thank you, Hattie. Meg, on to you.
So hi everybody, I'm Meg and you may know me as the current head of life and style at the Courier. Throughout my time at Newcastle, I've been actively involved in all aspects of student media and believe that my contributions have helped to facilitate positive change. The opportunities that student media has given me has allowed me to grow into the person that I am today, and no matter what the outcome of this debate is, for that I will be forever grateful. If elected as student media officer, I want to ensure that every Newcastle student who wishes to get involved at student media has the access to the same positive experience that I've had. For me, student media should give people the opportunity to get the most out of their involvement. And so whether that be to join a community of like-minded people, to express themselves in a supportive environment, or to enhance and develop the skills that are needed in any creative career. This is why my manifesto offers students an inclusive, accessible and approachable student media experience. I hope that this debate shows my passion for creating a student media space where everybody feels welcome and valued, But most of all, I want to show you all that this is how we do it.
All right. Thank you for your opening statements and allowing our audiences to get to know you better. My second question is a general one for both candidates. While there are no concrete figures on engagement rates, one article on the Courier's website averages around 50 clicks, which is seemingly dismal considering the university's 50,000 strong student population. The engagement of the other branches of student media, namely Newcastle University Television and Newcastle Student Radio, are even harder to quantify. Do you think the university's media branch is sufficiently prominent among students on campus? And based on your answers, what are the steps that you will take to increase its prominence? I shall begin this time with Meg.
Thank you very much. So, on a whole, I guess looking at those kind of figures that you've said, the answer would be no, that we're not kind of prominent in the student community. And one of my manifesto points is to have an increased and collaborative social media presence. So that would be increasing our social media output and ensuring that links for all of our articles or the hard work of any of the volunteers, whether that be the Courier, NSR or NUTV, those are kind of accessed more widely. And as part of that, I would like to work with societies and work with the university and the SU to ensure that this is, kept shared on all of these social media platforms.
All right. This floor is yours, Hattie.
Thank you. Definitely a good question. I have to agree that sort of getting engagement can be quite difficult among students. One of my manifesto policies kind of helped solve that. Was definitely through social media and utilising what we have already, obviously through the NSR, the Courier, NUTV and the student media officer accounts, and creating cross-posting and collaboration between all four of those and ensuring things are shared more widely among the student populace using all four accounts and making sure there's crossover between the four because they feel quite very separated at the minute to me.
All right, I shall open this opportunity for the candidates to build on each other's response. Do you have any comments for one another? Yes?
Yeah, I'd like to just reiterate that what Hattie said, it is a really good chance for us to be kind of making sure that we are cross-posting across all of our accounts, but also ensuring that the separate identity of all of the branches kind of remains there, because although we are student media, each of our branches has their own individual identity, and I really think it's important that we kind of keep that prominent.
All right. Hattie, do you have any comments?
No.
All right. And with that, we can move on to the second question, which is on sustainability. So in both of your manifestos, sustainability is a big point. Hattie, you talk about creating a environment sub-editor. Meg, you talk about distributing leftover papers to the artists. A question for Hattie. How would you introduce a climate change sub-editor? Like, what would be the purview that of this editor onto you?
So the climate sub-editor role would effectively be an onset of a current science sub-editor, which we normally have two. So if there's no major climate news happening to report on, they can then report back on science. But I also want to encourage this position to help investigate how climate change is being handled in Newcastle, not just with the university, but in the city in general. Whether that's through interviews with researchers, of which there are many at Newcastle, or just longer form pieces based on freedom of information requests, which obviously take a little bit longer to publish just through dates that the government has set. This city obviously has a reputation as being a climate leader, but that doesn't mean we stop holding it accountable. I genuinely believe that having an environmental sub-editor on the team will increase our coverage on a weekly basis rather than putting a quota on how much we need to put out on that topic, for example.
All right. Thank you for the response. And Meg, the question for you is, if you are to be elected as student media officer, how would you guarantee the 3 climate articles that you listed out in your manifesto? I think Hattie also put out the point that it's not every day that you get this kind of news. So how would you ensure that? And also, like, for each sub-editor, how would you ensure that they include this climate aspect into their articles?
Yeah, so I guess if we split that question into 2 parts and tackle the first bit first, I think that climate-related issues are ever present all the time. And I think that even if there isn't huge climate-related news, we can fit the climate into all aspects of the paper, not necessarily just science. So for example, in this week's article lists, there were sustainability topics in our fashion and beauty section and in our food and drink section. And just because that's not front page news in science or current affairs doesn't mean that we can't include that. So I think it's important to remember that we can bring these things across the whole paper, and that's why I specify we will do at least 3 throughout the paper every week. The second bit, how would I ensure that sub-editors were doing that, is obviously every Monday at the moment we have our editorial team meetings, and for me what those meetings would include is ensuring that we have those 3, and if we don't, working as a team, as a whole editorial team, to work out where those might fit, whether that be current affairs, sport, life and style, or culture.
All right, thank you. George, do you have anything to add onto what they have spoken?
On the subject of the 3 climate articles, given that sub-editors have control of their own article lists, how would you ensure that that quota is met each week? Would you, how would you?
So just the same way that, for example, this year we've been really focusing on Newcastle-based content. So that is, it gives us a brief, but we still have total freedom when it comes to picking those articles or when it comes to sub-editors picking those articles. It would just be a quota that we would meet every week, because I really, really think that as a student paper and as a group of young people, we ought to kind of treat the climate crisis with the urgency that it demands. And so just making that, just as you've done with, make this Newcastle based, I would just be reiterating climate stuff is, really, really important, no matter where it fits in the paper, for example.
All right, I would also like to, at this point, encourage the candidates to speak up a little more so that our audiences who are tuning in virtually can also hear you all. I would also like to open the floor to any questions from the audience.
One over there. All right, I'm going to come over to you, Kaylee. Give me a sec. Hop over to you. Hold on.
I hope people can hear. Hello, hi. So I have read both of your manifestos, and I am part of the Courier and NSR, and I know you guys both mentioned podcasts, which is really, really good, and I think that's a really good idea. But I would like to know what else you have in mind specifically, like around NSR. What specific ideas have you got for the station other than podcasts?
All right, give me a second. So I will be repeating the questions for everyone's benefit. Essentially, what do you plan to introduce other than podcasts to encourage the collaboration between the Courier and also NSI and NUTV?
Would you like to, I'm happy to go first.
All right, let's go with Meg.
Fab. So my manifesto doesn't actually talk about podcasts. That only kind of lies in Hattie's manifesto. So I have a few things that I would introduce for NSR that come kind of surrounding a couple of my policies. So one of these being the positive relationships with clubs and societies. So one of my main ideas is the student media calendar. So this would be published in the Courier and on our website, but it would also be kind of verbally promoted on at least one of the NSR flagship shows, so either the breakfast show or the drive time show. And that would help to kind of bring us all together and ensure that we are working for the societies. Secondly, relating to my environmental policy, I would like to ensure that NSR and NUTV, this comes under as well, are actively kind of broadcasting and working with, for example, possibly student climate activism, for example, and not only the things that we have written down, but also the things that we can record, etc.
All right, Hattie, on to you.
So one point on my manifesto was about sports and getting sports clubs involved with student media, and I would really love to be able to give them a bigger platform, especially for bigger competitions such as finals, at least twice a year, and NSR would be a big part in doing that. I know they already have a sports exec on their committee, but I would love to be able to actually broadcast commentary as it's happening in those finals, along with broadcasting via NUTV and having pre and post match analysis write-ups within the Courier. I know they already do, NETV does great work with Fight Night, Varsity and Spotlight, and NSR can often be involved and overlap with those two. But I just think increasing that coverage and giving other sports clubs the opportunity would be really good.
All right, thank you for the responses. And I think that is a perfect segue into my next question, which is about sports. So it is implied by the both of you that there is insufficient coverage of Team Newcastle, which is essentially the university sports team. Why I say this is because Hattie's manifesto reads, ensure university sporting events are more widely broadcast, while Meg, you wrote that sports correspondent teams are needed to increase the coverage of Team Newcastle. For the benefit of our audiences, Newcastle University consistently ranks in the British Universities and Colleges Sports Box Top 10, which is the highest competitive level for university sports in the UK. For Hattie, do you think a collaboration to highlight the university sporting events, which will be done at least twice a year, according to your manifesto, sets the bar a little too low, considering that bucks run from October till July, and Team Newcastle competes in no less than 10 events?
Yeah, it's a completely valid point. When I was writing this manifesto, I wanted to set everything out that was actionable, and I knew I could do that. By saying at least 2 events, I'm not going to do 2 and then call it quits and call it a day and leave. I would love to do a lot more than that, but by putting that number on it, by putting any number on it really, I was just trying to make it realistic for myself, make sure it's actionable, make sure I can deliver on what I'm telling students. So of course, I'd love to do more than 2, but if I say at least 2, then there's a boundary there for me.
All right, and just to follow up on that, as I understand, there is the current system allows those writers who will be present at sporting events to cover it specifically. So, what is the difference between the current setup and yours?
So the best example I can give to it is how student media gets involved with Fight Night. Obviously a big boxing event that we cover yearly, and a lot of work and a lot of effort goes into that. But boxing isn't everyone's cup of tea, it's not particularly my cup of tea. And I would like to get more sports clubs the chance to have that kind of Fight Night treatment, where we do have broadcasts and filming, we do get lots of people involved, we get lots of pre and post match-up analysis up on the Courier. We get broadcasts on NSR, like I say. I think it would be more of a, how do I put this? Like expansion over the sporting final, particularly competitions.
All right, thank you for the response. And also, Hattie brought up the point of being feasible, achievable. Mac, to cover sporting events, you say you will create a sports correspondence team.
Mm-hmm.
However, to do so, it requires a very different set of skills, and when it comes to production, when it comes to reporting. So how will you train these sports correspondent reporters?
Yeah, so this actually ties into the what I think is one of the standouts of my manifesto, which is the regular in-house training opportunities. And this would kind of give training opportunities in lots of aspects of broadcast and written journalism, and there would be a definite potential there to do sporting related training. And I think, like you said, it does require a different set of skills, and this gives our volunteers the chance to build on those skills. And I think especially with student media, because we are a student-led institution, it's the time to be making the mistakes because you've got the time to work on them.
All right. Would the candidates like to respond or comment on each other's points?
Yeah, just on the in-house training point, I guess my thought on that was the Civic Investigative Journalism Centre holds fortnightly workshops that are free for students from big journalism institutions like the BBC and Bloomberg. So what would be the incentive? I guess we already have people coming in for student media afternoons, voluntary, off their own back. What would be the incentive for them to stay potentially for longer? Would we need to fund them? Like, how would that work when there are already opportunities, I guess, on campus that we can share around?
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so it it wouldn't necessarily be the people who are, for example, the guest speakers. It wouldn't necessarily be those people. It would be myself or the senior editing team or people from within the university who are here right now and have the ability to share those skills. For example, the media law training that we get every year from David Baines. All it takes is to kind of send the email and expand that out to everybody, or to use potentially the people from the Student Media Afternoons if they are willing to, but it's not kind of full stop at those people.
All right, thank you. And also, just now during the audience question, it was mentioned the topics of NSR and NUTV. So as student media continues to adapt with the times, it is also important for reporting to be accompanied by audio and visual elements. So of course last year what happened was the editor of the Courier title was expanded to encompass these two branches. In your opinion, has NSR and NUTV been represented sufficiently since this move? And are there any improvements to the dynamics among the three branches of student media that you hope to oversee if you are elected to the role of student media officer? And I think the key question here is, how would you ensure that all three branches are represented? Because there has been feedback that your manifesto feels geared towards the career still. Of course, there has been improvements. So, but here I would like to allow the candidates to respond. Hattie?
Yeah. So I think definitely the rebrand was the right move, because, as I say, in my opinion, the Courier, NSR, and NUTV are their own branches. They all just happen to fall under the umbrella of the term student media. So student media officer is definitely the right rebrand. I think sometimes it is hard just to make sure that everyone is included and involved. One policy that I would really like to do to make sure that that is increased and that everyone feels like a community under that umbrella term is to rebrand write-ins, which were events that happened last year, and they were particularly just for members of the Courier, but I want to open them up to all of student media and have them as student media sit-ins. These are just for whether it's writers looking for a place to work on articles at the Courier, NUTV crew planning another show, or NSR hosts organising a show. It'll be a social space, but also a collaborative workspace where people can just sit and come together. It doesn't matter what part of your team you're on, whether you're just an exec, whether you're helping out, whether you're just a writer, whoever you are. It'll just be another space to make everyone feel included and involved.
All right, on to you, Meg.
Thank you. Yes, so I think this ties into all of my policies, because I do believe that, for example, as I mentioned before, the student media calendar, that would be something that would be kind of broadcasted on all social media platforms, on our websites, on NSR flagship shows, for example. Secondly, my in-house media training opportunities would be open to all students, no matter whether they were actively involved, but it would be open to all branches of student media. And I think something that is really important, and that I believe George has done really well, is kind of bringing us all together and ensuring that we almost have this open door policy, and we have people coming in from NSR to the office and people from the Courier now having their own NSR shows, for example. I believe that there has been that good thing that has happened, but more is always still to come, and that's why I want to make all of student media accessible, inclusive, and approachable.
All right, thank you. George, would you have any comments to make?
Yeah, just excuse me. Something on the student media calendar. So the Courier once attempted to feature society events on page 2 of the paper, but it proved to be unwieldy to write through delays in comms with societies, and also difficult to read through problems with the presentation of it on page 2. Meg, how would yours be different to that?
So yeah, this is something I have thought about since kind of coming up with this idea, and something that has kind of been successfully achieved, specifically in Campus Comment this year, is their campus spotlights, where they have got in contact with particular societies. I've also been approached, so for example, I did a spotlight on the LGBTQ+ History Month at Newcastle, and all that took was for them to reach out to me, and as a result of that, I have been in contact with Sexpression, and I'm planning an event with them in 2 weeks' time. So it almost comes from a word of mouth, And now people know, I believe it was the 93% club that got in contact first. And once people know that we are able to kind of highlight their events, that happens. And on the readability issue, I guess, it would be a physical calendar format. It would take reworking page 2 to kind of fit this calendar in, but it literally would look like a physical calendar Monday through Sunday.
All right, thank you. And in the interest of time, I would also like to open the floor for any questions from the audience.
We got a lot of questions.
That's a lot.
So we're gonna take a few audience questions now instead of just one. We'll start with
Hello. Okay, so as the head of sport for the Courier, you both. It's very nice to see that you're both enthusiastic about getting more sports reporting for clubs across all student media. I was kind of wondering what your approach to this would be like practically, because I know you were talking about Fight Night, Hattie, which is a really great thing that all student media is able to do, but it takes a lot of resources and it's a big effort, and it's only occasionally every year. So whereas I know for the Courier sports section, sports reports are done on a basis of someone from the club writes that report usually, and so we have to kind of get in touch with them, and it can be quite complicated. And I know NUTV are kind of in talks to try and get more sports coverage on TV, which is really good. But again, they're kind of thinking about working with clubs to get coverage done, because it takes a lot of resources and stuff, and just practically in terms of getting enough people over to Cochrane Park or whatever to film a whole football match, film a whole rugby match, what would your approach be working with clubs?
Again, it comes down to feasibility. It's why I say at least twice a year, because I know the effort that goes in is insane to be able to do it, and it's not something we can just every weekday go out and film and get it all up. It's just impossible to do it like that. So it comes back to that feasibility question of doing it twice a year, and making sure those connections are strong and good with all branches of student media, and there's interconnection and communication between everyone.
Sorry, I also like to remind the candidates again to project your voices.
Sorry.
The audience online. All right, so, Meg, would you like to respond to that also?
Yeah, so of course, this is kind of where my dedicated sports correspondence teams come in, because this would be teams made up of people from the clubs who perhaps are the regular writers or the people who are regularly wanting to kind of do their match reports, but it would also be made up of people who want to write sports journalism, our sports editors, our head of sport. And obviously this team would go out and kind of do, as Hattie says, it is about feasibility and it is doing what they are able to do, but the whole point, I believe, is to ensure that we are covering as much as we can from a broad range. So I can only think of a few kind of sports that have been covered in our sports section at the moment. So I think being able to kind of branch out, for example.
Meg, with the sports correspondence team, you said it's the members of clubs who report for us as they do currently, as well as the senior editor, head of sport, Peter, for example, and the sports sub-editors. So how is what you're offering different to that current setup?
So we would have a team of people who were dedicated sports correspondents, and by that I mean dedicated Newcastle sports. And then obviously they would be removed from our sub-editors because they would be producing the content for the sub-editors to lay up, but it doesn't mean that the sub-editors or the head of sport would have any say in this, the same way that we do now, the same way that our sub-editors put the lists of the articles together.
All right, because I saw there were a lot of hands that went up just now, maybe we could go with another question from the audience.
Yeah, we're gonna do a few more. I've got one here.
And I would also like to say we might need to cut down the response time to 40 seconds, so please try to condense your answers. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and ask these questions quickly. I've got one for each candidate. So, Hattie, first of all with you, a few of manifesto points have mentioned increasing levels of broadcast, so therefore mentioned sport coverage, but also having a video of the week from NUTV. Increasing coverage is something that NUTV constantly works through, something that I've constantly worked on. So what are the issues you think are stopping us from doing that at the moment, and how do you support us overcoming that? And then my question for Meg is kind of building on what was already asked in sport coverage, but specifically the part about being dedicated. So you already answered somewhat how that affects the Courier. I didn't quite follow what you said, but it somewhat explains that. What would that mean for NUTV and NSR? What are these dedicated people? Are they then forbidden from doing anything else in NUTV? Exactly how are they dedicated? Thank you.
All right,
Am I
Hattie
okay
first.
So yeah, NUTV, obviously you guys do insanely amazing work and it's incredible the content you do put out. I believe that having that interconnection and cross-posting between the 4 social media accounts hopefully will boost engagement and volunteers for all branches of student media, particularly NUTV. I also believe that just having that video of the week segment, that doesn't have to be like a new video every single week. That can be something from the archives. We can pull something out. I think just highlighting older stuff, always getting more views consistently on all your content is definitely the way to go.
Fab. Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to take mine. So yeah, so Harry, you said about how would these people be forbidden from doing anything else? No, absolutely not. The same way that our, I don't know, fashion and beauty sub-editors are not forbidden from, you know, writing for science. So this group of people would be, you know, their responsibilities would lie in, for example, NUTV going out and filming a particular sport, or NSR going out and kind of live broadcasting that particular sport, but it doesn't mean that they couldn't have another exec role in a different branch of student media, or to be a writer for the Courier, but kind of work predominantly with the correspondence with NSR. So there's always, and I think that helps people to expand and develop all of the skills for kind of all of their creative industries and the media industry as a whole. So no, the answer is they wouldn't be limited to just that one thing.
All right, thank you for your responses. Before we go back to the audience questions, I would just like to quickly take up some time here. There is a question from YouTube. Sorry. If there has been some feedback from writers that the student media afternoons are sometimes daunting and not the most accessible for new writers. Would you change anything about these meetings? Meg, you may go first.
Yeah, so I think that it's really important that we have our social media output for our student media afternoons kind of well in advance, because people tend to, you know, plan their time, plan their days, specifically Wednesday afternoons that we have free from, you know, timetable classes. So I think it's important that we encourage people to come via social media, but in order to make them accessible, and a way that I believe that something I've done has facilitated more kind of more attendees is when we did the Freshers Fair and the Refreshers Fair. There were a lot of people who came to the Refreshers Fair and came then straight up to the student media afternoon. So I think holding events like that where it's not necessarily as daunting would help.
Yes, I hate to be a stickler here, but the question on how would you make it less daunting, I guess, is the fact that you will be entering a room not knowing a lot of people. It's like, how would you improve that,
so I think
experience?
It's really important for everybody on our editorial team to be welcoming and friendly, and kind of when people enter that room, because yeah, you're right, it is daunting to walk in and see, you know, 20, 30 people sitting there that you don't know. For everybody to be welcoming, friendly, saying hi, getting to know all of our writers, I think making those friendship connections is what's really important.
All right, thank you. Hattie?
Yeah. I can just speak from personal experience. When I went to my first writers' meeting, as it was then called, I was absolutely terrified. It is scary stuff, and no one tells you that until you go. So like Meg says, it's making people accessible, being nice and friendly to people, not even when you're in the room, but having people outside of that room guiding you. I didn't know where the room was. My friends had to push me to go the first time. Like having just that guide, just that helping hand to be like, oh, it's just up the stairs, by the way. I think that does the world of good. It would have meant so much to me as a first year.
All right, thank you very much. And before returning to the audience, I have a question from It Happens Here, which is a society on campus that helps victims of sexual assault and campaigns against it. They would like to ask the candidates, how do you plan to use investigative journalism to push the university to tackle sexual violence? Hattie?
Yeah, I think when that comes down to it, freedom of information requests are really one of the best ways to go into pushing the university for information and for data. They're obviously a much longer form process. We have to let them have 20 days before they can respond. If they need any edits changing to our request so that they can reply within the laws, that is another 20 days. But FOIs is something that I would really, really like to work on and have previously sent out to government sources and would like to push the university on there. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And Mac?
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of make reference to our front page piece from a couple of weeks ago that was regarding victims of sexual assault and kind of how many of these people had kind of their request had been looked into, and that was created, like Hattie says, from a series of FOIs that were sent out by our news team. And it, there were also comments from It Happens Here within the article. And I think working with the societies that, this is the core of their, principles is to kind of deal with these issues. So I would be really, really happy to work with those societies and also to continue to send out FOIs to the universities. And getting this stuff on the front page as well, I think is really important.
All right, thank you very much for the response. And we shall have one last audience question. So who will be the lucky one?
Thank you, Muslim. It's for both of you, really. So, Hattie, you've inspired me for this question. You and Maud work together as co-heads. Do you see that happening more along the newspaper? What would you do about it? Would you welcome it? Would you not?
Yeah, do you want me to answer
It's a
that
very open
before you-
question, just go.
Having 2 heads per section is something that I do have on my manifesto. Maud, you absolute angel, you have been a massive help to me this year. I don't know what I would have done without you. And I think just from a welfare standpoint, it eases your load knowing you have someone to go to be like, I don't know what to do with this page, who is also probably going to look at that page at another point as well and is on your side. And it's just been the biggest help, and it's something I'd love to introduce for every section just to encourage further collaboration, get more people involved. I think it's been great, yeah.
I'd love to just ask Hattie how you think the uptake of that would be, because specifically this year, for example, the senior team that we have is pretty much everybody who applied, maybe barring 1 or 2 people. How do you think the uptake? How would you encourage current sub-editors to apply?
Yeah, so I think definitely just sharing our experiences of what being a senior is like has been a massive thing. I mean, I had to go and reach out to the old heads of culture and be like, how did you find it, by the way? And definitely sharing those experiences, making them public, telling people what it's like. Hopefully there'll be a few more returning sub-editors who are progressing, hopefully, fingers crossed, in senior sections, looking at the year stages of everyone. And there's no reason why if someone does exceptionally well still as a sub-editor in their first year, they may progress into a senior editor position in second.
All right, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, if there was, for example, somebody not pulling their weight, you said from a welfare perspective, what if all of the workload was still going on to that second person because the first senior editor wasn't pulling their weight?
Yeah, that's something then I would definitely look into and have those conversations and have meetings. It's something I want to know, and anonymous feedback forms, welfare check-ins, having those routes for people to come talk to me, I think they're really important, and that is how I would hope to communicate those things alongside senior meetings that George has had now.
All right, and for the last one, Mac, your response to the question.
Yeah, so I think having, from my perspective as the single only head of Life and Style, from what I'm aware, it was George's plan from the beginning to have 2 of us, but because of lack of applications, it was just me. And I believe that getting those applications is actually really hard. And it's not something I'm against, but I am wary of the fact that if you are working in a team of 2, if one person is not pulling their weight when you are kind of supposed to be delegating tasks, that can cause issues. And I think that just ensuring that if we do have bigger senior editor teams, that the communication is there.
All right, thank you. And in the interest of time, we will now enter the final segment of this debate. Hattie, Mac, thank you for the excellent points that you've raised tonight. I would now like to invite you to provide your closing arguments. Once again, this will be 1 minute long and uninterrupted. So may I please begin with Hattie?
So firstly, I just want to say thank you so much all for coming and giving your time to this debate. Like I say, when I first came to university, I was unbelievably anxious. You have no idea about student media, to the point where I almost didn't go to the first event, and I was sat in the library and my friends were like, no, you just have to go. You have to go do it now. And it quickly just became part of my routine. It just became part of my life. And that was all thanks to the warmth of the community and the people there, some of whom are now still some of my closest friends. It would be an absolute honor to continue to foster this like welcoming and warm environment next year, alongside building on just like the brilliant work of all the previous student media officers by just keeping things current, creative, and collaborative. So please remember to vote Hattie #1 for student media officer next week. And to paraphrase my favorite artist, T-Swizzle, your vote belongs with me.
All right, and Meg, not sure I got the reference though, but Meg.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to start by thanking the elections coverage team for all of their hard work. It's productions like this one that really encapsulate what student media is all about. And it would not be enough to just say that I'm proud of every one of you. I'm also proud of knowing every single one of you. I'd also like to thank Johnathan for moderating the debate, George for every opportunity that you've given me, and to Hattie for making this whole experience so interesting and to helping me to remain focused. I think that student media is the perfect place for students to express themselves, meet new people, and gain invaluable skills for any creative industry. If elected, I will ensure that student media is inclusive, accessible, and approachable. I will ensure we're tackling important issues head-on, whilst giving everybody in our community the chance to engage with creation, production, and consumption of our content. Finally, I would continue to wholeheartedly integrate each branch of student media with the wider student body and make sure that we're producing content for students, by students. Thank you very much for everybody who is supporting me, and don't forget to follow my social medias and vote Meg Howe #1 on Monday. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And with that, we have now concluded tonight's Newcastle University Student Union debate for the role of Student Media Officer.
Isn't that nice? All right, well, guys, thank you all so much for coming. We're going to be, please stay in the room, or, I mean, don't, it's up to you. It's a free country. But we're going to have the Welfare and Equalities Officer debate starting in about 5-6 minutes. So, yeah, thank you, guys.